The forest edge was silent when I found him. Even the usual chatter of birds seemed to fade, as if the whole valley was holding its breath. I first saw the blood before I saw the elephant. Dark stains along the dry grass, and a trail pressed deep into the soil by something massive that had dragged itself toward the trees. When I followed it, I found him lying on his side, sides heaving, eyes dull with exhaustion. His left hind leg was shredded, the hide torn open from the knee down. It didn't take long to understand what had happened. The marks were from hyenas. They must have caught him alone and attacked when he stumbled near the edge of the swamp. Somehow, he had managed to fight them off and limp this far. I called in immediately. Miguel answered first, asking for coordinates. My voice shook when I said it. I'd seen wounded elephants before, but this one was different. There was something unbearable in the way he tried to lift his head when he heard the helicopter in the distance, as if he knew help was coming. I approached slowly, speaking in a calm, steady tone. You learn to do that after years in the field. Animals feel your heartbeat before they hear your words. He turned his head toward me, his trunk twitching weakly. I could see flies gathering around the wound, and the smell of blood was thick and metallic. The only sound was the faint rustle of his breath. 10 minutes later, the land cruiser arrived. Henna jumped out first, carrying her field kit. She was the best wildlife vet I'd ever met. Steady hands, no wasted motion. She didn't say anything at first, just knelt beside the wound and started cleaning it with saline, while Miguel and I poured buckets of water over the dried blood. The elephant flinched once, a deep tremor running through his body, but he didn't resist. Henna glanced up at me. His pulse is weak, she said quietly. If we don't move him soon, he won't last the night. She signaled to Miguel to fetch the portable 4 bags. We worked quickly, setting up the fluids through a thick vein behind his ear. The color of the blood flowing through the line told us what we already knew. He'd lost too much. The problem wasn't just the bleeding. The infection had already started. The hyenas had torn deep enough to expose muscle, and the wound edges were turning gray. Hannah injected a broad-spectrum antibiotic, then leaned back on her heels. We can stabilize him for a while, she said, but not here. We can't risk him collapsing from sepsis before morning. Miguel frowned. There's no road for the truck this far in, he reminded us. Even if we tried, the terrain would kill the suspension before we reached the gate. That left only one option, airlift. It wasn't ideal. Moving an animal this size under sedation was always dangerous, even in daylight. At night, it could be fatal. But we had no time to wait. Hannah met my eyes. We need the helicopter, Travis. Tonight. I radioed the base. The operator hesitated when I gave the request. Flying in darkness over uneven terrain with a 4-ton load wasn't exactly standard protocol. I said only, if we wait until morning, we'll lose him. There was a pause, then the short click of confirmation. The rescue chopper would leave within the hour. While we waited, we worked to keep the elephant alive. Hannah wrapped the wound in layers of gauze soaked in antiseptic. Miguel adjusted the 4-line every few minutes, watching the slow drip. The air was cooling, but I could still feel the heat coming off the elephant's skin, that burning, feverish heat of infection. He groaned once, a low rumble that felt like it came from the ground itself. I rested my hand on his forehead, feeling the coarse texture of his skin. Hang in there, big guy, I murmured. Help's on the way. When the helicopter lights finally appeared between the trees, the sound filled the valley. The elephant's ears twitched, and for a second, I thought he might panic. But he didn't. He stayed still, eyes half closed, breathing slow and shallow. Hannah stood up, brushing the dirt from her knees. We'll sedate him fully once they're ready to lift, she said. Her voice was steady, but I could see the worry behind her eyes. Sedation is tricky in elephants. Too little, and they thrash in pain. Too much, and their hearts stop. She looked back at me. There's no margin for error tonight. The rotor wash began to whip dust into the air as the helicopter hovered above us. The team inside lowered the heavy sling, its steel hooks clanging faintly in the light. I helped Miguel clear a space around the elephant's body. Hannah prepared the tranquilizer dart and took a slow breath before pressing it against his thick hide. We all knew what came next would decide whether this rescue ended in life or loss. The tranquilizer dart hissed as it struck the thick hide near the elephant's shoulder. He barely flinched. For a moment, there was only the thudding of the helicopter above us and the slow, exhausted rise and fall of his chest. Hannah watched the small gauge on her wrist monitor, counting quietly under her breath. Then she exhaled, tension leaving her shoulders. "It's in," she said. "Now we wait." The air smelled of dust and disinfectant. Miguel and I crouched near the elephant's leg, checking the bindings around the wound. The temporary dressing had soaked through again, blood and antiseptic dripping into the dirt. We replaced the gauze, layering new pads over the old ones. Each movement had to be careful, deliberate. One wrong pull could tear the damaged tissue further. The elephant's breathing slowed. His trunk rested against the ground, limp but still warm. Hannah knelt beside his head, placing 2 fingers near the corner of his eye to check reflexes. His eyelid twitched once, then stilled. She glanced at me. "Sedation's taking hold, but it's shallow. We'll need to maintain him through the lift." I looked toward the helicopter team. They were unloading the lifting sling, a web of heavy canvas straps connected to steel rings. Under the harsh floodlight, it looked more like an industrial harness than a rescue tool. 2 crewmen moved quickly, spreading the straps across the ground. We'd done this before with smaller animals, but never one this size, this wounded. Hannah injected another small dose of sedative through the catheter she'd placed earlier. "We can't risk him waking midair," she said. "But we can't push too far either. Elephants metabolize differently. The line between calm and cardiac arrest is razor thin." Miguel wiped the sweat from his forehead and nodded to the helicopter. "Ready when you are," he called. The pilot's voice crackled through the radio, calm but firm. "You've got 15 minutes before we lose our weather window. Clouds are moving in fast." We worked faster. Miguel and I slipped the canvas straps beneath the elephant's belly, guiding them under his chest and hips. Every move had to be coordinated. The fabric was coarse, the weight immense. When the final loop was in place, we clipped the steel rings to the main hook. The metal clanged softly, almost drowned by the thrum of the rotor blades. Hannah crouched near the elephant's head again, shining her flashlight into his eyes. Pupils constricted, heart rate stable, for now. She looked at me. "Travis, keep that 4-line clear. If it kinks midair, he could crash before we land." I nodded, adjusting the line and tightening the band around the ear to hold it steady. The 4 bags swayed gently in the wind, the slow drip catching the beam of the light each time it fell. For the next few minutes, everything moved in rhythm. The crew checked harness tension. Miguel secured the tail straps. Hannah monitored vitals. My hands worked automatically, though my thoughts kept circling the same fear. What if the sedative wore off mid-flight? I'd seen elephants wake too soon before. Panic could kill them faster than blood loss. Then it happened, a twitch. A faint movement from the elephant's trunk. Just a small, uncertain shift in the dirt. Hannah froze. "Did you see that?" I nodded. She pressed her stethoscope to his chest. The rhythm was strong but quickening. "He's reacting already," she said, eyes narrowing. "That's too soon." She turned to Miguel. "We don't have time to recalculate. If we wait, the adrenaline will counteract the drug. We lift now, or we lose control." The radio crackled again, pilot's voice, louder this time. 2 minutes, then we have to abort." Hannah's voice was calm, but I could see her jaw tighten. "All right. Miguel, Travis, hold clear." She moved fast, checking the safety pins on each sling connection. When she was satisfied, she signaled upward with a flashlight. The helicopter responded with a surge of sound. The downwash tore through the clearing, whipping dust and leaves into the air. The straps tightened slowly. The elephant's massive body began to lift, an impossible sight. 4 tons of life rising into the dark. I held my breath, watching the harness stretch but hold. For a second, everything seemed steady. Then the elephant's trunk moved again, stronger this time. The sound that came from him wasn't loud, but it cut through the engine noise, a low, guttural moan. Hannah's eyes went wide. "He's coming up too soon," she shouted. The pilot's voice came through the radio, clipped and urgent. "Do we continue or drop?" Hannah hesitated, glancing between the rising animal and the monitor in her hand. His heart rate spiked, then steadied again, teetering on the edge. "Keep climbing," she said finally. "It's our only shot now." The helicopter climbed higher, the elephant swaying gently beneath it, suspended between earth and sky. All we could do was watch, hoping the fragile balance would hold. The elephant rose higher, the straps creaking under his weight as the helicopter climbed. For a few long seconds, he swung in a slow arc above the clearing, his legs hanging limp, trunk pointing toward the ground like a question mark. Then the pilot adjusted power and the motion steadied. The sling tightened, found its balance, and the whole shape began to move forward into the darkness. The rotor wash flattened the grass around us. Dust stung my eyes as I watched the elephant drift away, a huge gray shadow suspended beneath the bright halo of the landing light. Miguel shielded his face with one arm. Beside me, Hannah kept her eyes fixed on the glow of the small monitor in her hand, linked wirelessly to the sensors taped to the elephant's side. Heart rates elevated but holding, she said, raising her voice over the engine noise. Breathing's a little shallow. We need to keep this flight short. We will, I said. I wanted to sound certain. I wasn't. The helicopter banked east, heading toward the field hospital near the main river. Its noise slowly faded into a dull roar. Once it was clear of the trees, Miguel tapped my shoulder and pointed toward the land cruiser. Let's move. We can still beat them to the compound by road, if the track hasn't washed out. We loaded the remaining gear, slammed the doors, and started the engine. As we bounced over ruts and roots, the radio crackled to life with the pilot's voice. Rescue 1 to ground team. We're at 500 feet and climbing. Load is stable. Moderate crosswind from the south. Hannah grabbed the handset. Copy that. I'm reading his heart rate at 90. Keep it smooth. No sudden altitude changes. Even through the static, I could hear the tension in the pilot's reply. Roger. Doing my best. Tell him to stay asleep for me. We hit a patch of loose gravel, and the truck skidded sideways before regaining traction. Miguel grunted and kept his eyes on the barely visible track. The trees closed around us, branches scraping the sides of the vehicle. Above the canopy, the distant drum of the helicopter came and went with the terrain. Minutes stretched. The monitor in Hannah's lap glowed in the dark cab, its numbers shifting in small increments. Heart rate, respiratory rate, oxygen saturation. Each change felt like a verdict. He's fighting the drug, she muttered at one point. Adrenaline from the pain, maybe. Or just stubborn. Elephants don't let go easily. Can you give him more? I asked. Not up there, she said. Not unless I was with him. The dose we gave is the longest safe window we have. We have to trust it holds. The radio crackled again. Rescue 1 here. We're getting some turbulence over the ridge. Load is starting to swing. My stomach tightened. I pressed the handset closer to my ear. How bad? Manageable for now, the pilot answered. But this wind wasn't in the forecast. If it picks up, we might have to divert. Divert to where? Miguel muttered. There's nowhere closer with a proper crane or ramp. Hannah didn't look up from the monitor. If they try to land anywhere else, we lose time. And he doesn't have time. Outside, the trees thinned and the sky opened. For a brief moment, we saw the helicopter ahead of us, silhouetted against the faint glow of the horizon. The elephant hung beneath it like a moving island of darkness, smaller from this distance, but no less heavy in my mind. The truck jolted again as we crossed a narrow, dry riverbed. Rocks scraped the undercarriage. I gripped the dashboard, half listening to the engine, half listening to the radio. Rescue 1 to base, the pilot called. Approaching Sector 3. Crosswind increasing. Load angle at 15 degrees. Base control answered with a calm voice. You're still within limits, Rescue 1. Maintain heading. Field hospital is ready. Lights are on, surgical team standing by. Hannah exhaled slowly. At least they're ready, she said. If we can get him on the ground in one piece, they'll take it from there. The monitor beeped softly. Her forehead creased. His heart rate just jumped to 110. Is that too high? I asked. For a resting elephant under sedation, she said, yes. But we still have good oxygen. He's stressed, not crashing. Yet. The word hung in the cab like a stone. The next update came sooner than I expected. Rescue 1 here. We're over the last ridge before the compound. Crosswind now at 20 knots. Load swing increasing. I'm reducing speed, but we're getting some serious oscillation. Base responded immediately. Understood, Rescue 1. You are 2 minutes from the landing zone. Visual on your approach is clear. The pilot's voice came back, tighter now. Copy. But I want it on record. This is pushing the envelope. Miguel met my eyes for a second, then focused back on the track. We both knew what he meant. When a load that heavy starts to swing, each arc can feed into the next, building momentum like a pendulum. If the angle grew too steep, the helicopter could lose control. As if in answer, Hannah's monitor beeped again. Her eyes widened. "He's reacting to the motion," she said. "I'm getting brief spikes in heart rate and shallow breaths. His system doesn't like being a pendulum any more than the pilot does." We crested a small hill and finally saw the distant glow of the field hospital lights. The compound sat in an open clearing, a rectangle of white and yellow on the dark ground. Above it, the helicopter was descending, its landing lights carving bright cones through the dust. Rescue 1 to ground. Beginning final approach. Load angle at 25 degrees and building. "I need a fast offload." Base replied. "Ground crew ready. As soon as your skids touch, we move." Another burst of static. Then the pilot's voice lowered, more to himself than to us. "Come on, girl. Just a little farther." I could picture his hands on the controls, muscles tight, eyes flicking between instruments and the dark shapes swinging below. Then Hannah leaned forward, squinting at the monitor. "Wait, something's off." "What is it?" I asked. "Look at this pattern," she said, pointing to the small graph of heart rate. "Every time the sling swings out, we get a sudden drop, then a sharp climb. That's not just stress. Something mechanical is changing with the load." Before I could answer, the radio erupted again, this time with a harsh edge I hadn't heard all night. "Rescue 1 here. We've got uneven tension on the forward sling. One of the straps is taking more load than the others. If it shifts any further, it could snap." For a moment, no one spoke. The compound lights flickered in the distance, the helicopter still hanging above them like a fragile promise. Then base control came back, voice controlled but urgent. "Rescue 1, you must decide now. Adjust your landing plan, or we risk losing both the strap and the animal." In the cab, the three of us sat frozen, listening. Up there in the dark, a single choice would decide how this rescue ended. The hospital floodlights cut through the dust as the helicopter touched down. The air was thick with the smell of fuel and soil. Ground crews moved fast, their movements rehearsed, silent except for shouted commands over the rotor noise. The sling lowered, the elephant descending inch by inch until his body met the ground with a dull thud that shook the loose boards of the platform. The moment his weight settled, Hannah and the surgical team ran forward. "Go, go, go!" she shouted. The crew unhooked the slings and backed away as the helicopter pulled up, banking sharply to the side. The sudden quiet afterward felt unreal. Just the sound of insects, engines idling, and the rasp of the elephant's breathing. He was alive, but barely. His pulse fluttered weakly through the skin near his ear. The sedation had begun to wear off, and the tremors in his legs made the stretcher straps rattle. We had minutes, maybe less, before pain or panic sent his system into shock. "Get the reversal ready," Hannah said. "Not yet, just stand by." "Miguel, start fluids." "Travis, help me stabilize this leg." We worked under the floodlights, each of us soaked in sweat. Hannah made a quick incision around the edge of the wound to drain the infection. Thick fluid spilled out, and the stench hit like a wave. She didn't flinch. "Suction," she called, and one of the assistants pushed the hose close, clearing the wound so she could see. The gashes were worse than they'd looked in the field. Some of the tissue was already dead. She used long-handled forceps to remove it piece by piece, every cut deliberate. "Clamp," she said. The nurse placed one in her palm without looking. Hannah's eyes never left the wound. She worked fast, sealing bleeders with pressure and gauze. Miguel adjusted the flow, watching the color of the fluid draining through the line. I glanced at the monitor. His heart rate was erratic. Up, down, up again. I felt the weight of it in my chest with every beat. Hannah noticed too. "We're losing perfusion," she said. "Get the epinephrine ready." One of the assistants handed her a syringe. She injected it carefully into a vein just behind the ear, then leaned close, listening to the chest. "Come on, big guy. Stay with me." For a long moment, nothing changed. Then the rhythm steadied again, slow, strong. Hannah exhaled softly. "All right, we've got him." The next phase was the hardest. The wound had to be cleaned deep into the muscle to prevent infection from spreading. Every minute added to the strain on his body. Sweat ran down Hannah's face. The smell of antiseptic burned my nose. She called for fresh saline, for more gauze, for the antibiotic line. I handed her what she needed, trying not to think about how much blood had already pooled under the table. The chief surgeon, an older man named Patel, joined us halfway through. He'd been preparing the sutures. When he saw the extent of the damage, his expression tightened. "Hannah, you're right to move fast. But if we go any deeper, we risk losing the leg. If we don't, she said, we lose his life. She didn't look up. Patel nodded. Then let's finish it. He took over for a few minutes, guiding the stitching needle through layers of thick skin, tying off arteries, and laying a lattice of sutures to hold the muscle together. When it was done, they wrapped the limb in a heavy dressing soaked in antiseptic. The skin glistened in the light, streaked with blood and iodine. He's going into hypothermia, one of the nurses said. Temperatures dropping fast. Blankets, Patel ordered. Miguel and I covered the massive body with insulated sheets, tucking them in where we could. The elephant's chest rose and fell shallowly. Hannah checked the heart again. Stronger than before, but fragile. Every few seconds she'd glance at the monitor, then back at the animal's eyes. The hours blurred together. When Patel finally said, "That's all we can do for tonight," it felt like we'd aged years. The elephant lay still, breathing faintly through the long tube running down his throat. Machines hummed softly around him. The bleeding had stopped, the wound was clean, but the battle wasn't over. Hannah leaned on the rail, exhaustion written across her face. "We'll keep antibiotics running through the night. If infection sets in now, it's over." Miguel nodded, checking the drip line. "He'll pull through," he said quietly, but I couldn't tell if he was saying it for her or for himself. When I stepped outside, dawn was breaking over the savannah. The sky was pale pink, the air cool after the long night. Behind me, I could still hear the steady rhythm of the monitors. Inside that room, life hung by a thread, thin, fragile, but unbroken. The first night after surgery felt endless. None of us slept. We watched the monitors glow and the slow, fragile rhythm of the elephant's breath. Wrapped in blankets and tubes, his massive body seemed both indestructible and on the verge of collapse. When his temperature finally steadied before dawn, Hannah whispered, "That's a good sign. He's fighting." The next few days were a blur of antibiotics, fluids, and quiet prayers. Once, his fever spiked and chaos filled the ward. Ice packs, orders, alarms. But he held on. By the fourth day, the infection eased, and Hannah smiled faintly as she checked the wound. "Healthy tissue. He's healing." A week later, he tried to stand. It was clumsy and brief, but it meant everything. With the physio team's help, he learned again what his legs were for. The first full rise brought silence. No cheers, just awe. His injured leg trembled, but held. For the first time since we'd found him, he looked whole again. Recovery was slow but steady. Short walks, careful stretches, constant vigilance. Outside, the grass turned green and wild elephants passed in the distance. Our patient would freeze, ears forward, remembering where he belonged. When he was strong enough to walk the enclosure, Patel proposed the next step, a protected valley with water, shade, and safety. Hannah agreed. He needed freedom, not walls. I hesitated, recalling the dangerous first flight, but agreed. This one would be different. Clear sky, calm wind, gentle sedation. The helicopter lifted him once more, steady and sure. From above, the valley unfolded in gold and green. When we lowered him down, he stood quickly, testing his leg, then walked toward the water. Sunlight danced on the spray as he lifted his trunk and bathed himself. We watched from afar. Miguel asked if he knew what we'd done. "Maybe not," I said, "but he knows he's alive, and that's enough." As dusk settled, a small herd appeared on the ridge. They paused, sensing him. Our bull raised his head and rumbled. The others answered and began to move toward him. We turned away, leaving them to meet on their own terms. On the flight back, the valley glowed below us. People ask why we risked so much for one animal. I never have an easy answer. Maybe because, in that thin space between life and death, effort matters. That night, I fell asleep seeing him walking into the water, fragile, stubborn, and free.